Well, there was a budget. Welcome back to Political Paradigms. It is Toby and Theo. Theo, hello.
Hello.
Always good. Start the pod and he goes, haven't really read the news this week, Toby. It's always a good place to be.
Oh, wow. You're really just going to put that out there?
Yeah, it's...
Guys, I read books, all right?
He's been reading theory all week.
I've been reading Thomas Hobbes and John Rawls and Das Kapital, all right?
Let's get into Budget 2024 from Jeremy Hunt. Big tax cuts. National insurance cut by 2p in the pound for employees and the self-employed. They didn't have the money for an income tax cut. It sounds like they're teeing that up for a fiscal event in the autumn if the election hasn't occurred yet. My money would be on September for that. Money, no pun intended. This is Jeremy Hunt talking about the flagship tax cut.
Today I go further. From April the 6th, employee national insurance will be cut by another 2p from 10% to 8%. And self-employed national insurance will be cut from 8% to 6%. It means an additional £450 a year for the average employee, or £350 for someone self-employed. When combined with the autumn reductions, it means 27 million employees will get an average tax cut of £900 a year. 2 million self-employed will get a tax cut averaging £650. Changes that make our system simpler and fairer, and changes that grow our economy by rewarding work. The OBR say, when combined with the autumn reduction, our national insurance cuts will mean the equivalent of 200,000 more people in work, filling 1 in 5 vacancies, adding 0.4% to GDP and 0.4% to GDP per head.
Now, to be honest, it is a little bit underwhelming considering this is the last full budget before the election. There's no way there's another full budget. And This is what we get. They're paying for that, as well as, borrowing money. They are getting rid of non-dom tax status, which is what Labour had pledged to do. Labour often go, we're going to pay for this or this or this by using the non-dom money. The Tories have now U-turned and taken that money off the table. Perhaps more significant as well, I know this is a bugbear of yours, Theo, the salary thresholds at which people start paying income tax remain frozen, meaning people will pay more tax as their income rises. So fiscal drag is paying for a lot of this. So stealth tax rises in amongst the tax cuts. Labour had a few graphics out, like, they're giving you back this much, but they've actually taken this much, etc., etc. Theo, I think we know this isn't going to shift the dial meaningfully. Most polling indicates such. It's not like a terrible reaction to the budget, but it's kind of an indifferent reaction. I guess the better question is, was there a way this could have changed the game, or was this always going to be a damp squib?
I suppose taking some policies from the party that stands to win a 1997 magnitude victory
on a bad night. On a bad night.
On a bad night. But it didn't go down that way. I think if this was supposed to be some ace in his back pocket, it didn't go too well. Look, was this budget ever going to really signify anything for them? I think no, it's just another kind of checkpoint on the sleepwalk to death, as I characterized it.
I mean, the way I'd put this as well is, so when we started this podcast, obviously the Tories were 20 points behind. They're still 20 points behind. If we looked ahead to the March budget, right, would you have guessed things would still be as bad for the Conservatives, or would you have thought things may have improved a bit by now?
Honestly, I would have thought it could have got worse. I just kind of pictured the support, chipping away slowly over time, but kind of stagnant. That's kind of, slightly unprecedented. Just 6 months of very little change. I guess, not to sound cocky or anything, but I think perhaps I was right when I said there's pretty much nothing that will significantly shift the fortunes of the parties throughout the next couple of months. And we've had by-elections, we've had autumn statements, we've had budgets, we've had a few scandals, we've had a war in the Middle East, we've had controversy with the speaker, we've had so many things as a corollary of the Middle East war. Nothing's really shifted it since we started this podcast. This has all been pointless.
Labour crisis.
I take that back. The podcast has been great, but you see my point.
Labour crisis, Conservative comeback, all this stuff. Absolutely nothing bloody changes at all. And it's been a consistent picture. We're still going to be saying this in November. The election's still not happened, but it's still every week. Nothing's changed.
Let's not worry about that. Let's try and keep ourselves motivated to keep doing this.
I'm not going to lie, even the budget feels like it's just the November budget, but like second. They've just done it again. It's like, oh, we cut national insurance again. That worked so well the first time.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he thought, if it gave him 1% uptick, then, if he did it again, he'd get another 1%. I don't think it works like that.
So a little bit of a problem for Labour is the non-dom money. They are underplaying this. They're saying it doesn't really matter. Frankly, it was always a bit of weird math making, going, this little pot of money will cover everything. And it's kind of a holding position to be like, we're paying for everything. The reality is, in government, Labour will probably borrow money. And they will also probably raise some taxes. And they're not going to talk to us about that before the election. And it's, arguable the Conservatives would do the exact same thing because they're not going to be willing to preside over the complete collapse of the NHS either. So both parties are basically sort of engaging in fiscal fiction. But it's all about perceptions, what the public think. This was Rachel Reeves today, Sunday night, the 10th, talking about sort of her vision of the economy. She refused to do the interviews pre-budget. She waited post-budget, wanted to be all about the reaction. And I did see something interesting, which is Rachel Reeves seems to be cutting through a bit. She is very anodyne. She is very bland. But her image of sort of fiscal steel, I have seen in some polling, it does seem sort of voters view her as competent, those that have heard of her. This is what she had to say.
And in the end, you've got to grow the economy. This is the point that Andy Haldane was making on your programme last week. We need to get people back into work, ensure that they've got the skills to succeed and boost productivity. And our plans are about doing exactly that. The creation of the National Wealth Fund that we've spoken about this morning, businesses say that's why Aviva and Barclays have signed up to this task force. They say that there is the money ready to go if government put in place the right structures to unlock it. Reform of the planning system to get Britain building again. New homes and energy infrastructure as well. Reforming the apprenticeship levy so we can get people the skills that they need. Now, some of these things take time and the full impact takes time. But if we can get building homes, 1.5 million in the first term of a Labour government, that is money going into the economy right away.
But Theo, are you hearing anything meaningful from Labour, or is it just a holding position?
Just a holding position, and that's just fine. They can still pull off a Blair with a holding position.
Right.
They don't have to do anything exceptional. I said the same thing last week.
Yeah.
We don't need anything crazy from them. They're trying to appeal to a very broad base, and they're doing it fairly well. They don't need to risk losing it.
See, I did write about this actually on my Medium blog this week, and I was talking about, it does concern me, sort of I feel like this is probably the least scrutinised opposition. And it doesn't matter that they're not scrutinised, because they'll win. If their plans are scrutinised, and they come out with loads of stuff, it will probably be broadly popular, and they'll get away with it. If they come out with no policies, people will be annoyed, they'll still get away with it. It just feels like anything they do, they're still going to win. So they're doing damage limitation, saying we're not going to talk about anything we're going to do once we get into government. It creates a very provisional mandate. They're going to have full control of the 2025 spending review. God knows what they'll change. Anything from they'll implement full austerity to actually they're going to raise a load of taxes on the rich and sort of massive injection of cash into public services. They're just not telling us. Do you think there's a democratic concern that we just don't know what the opposition is going to do, Theo? Because it's probably not going to be bad. It's probably not going to be anything like crazy, but we just don't know.
We don't know it's not going to be anything crazy. I mean, Starmer comes off as slightly meek, but you never know what's hiding under that veneer. But on a serious note, I think, honestly, we can talk about the not really reflecting democratic sentiment, but I think the sentiment of people now is anything but what we have now. And I think people are not necessarily advocating for, a massive stimulation or massive austerity. I mean, in 2010, there's big consensus around austerity. In 2019, there was big consensus around Brexit. Right now, the consensus is Tories out. And so, yes, it's perhaps a grey area that Labour have kind of ambiguous policies. But then again, what people want is just a new government. and that's what they're offering. So in terms of specifics, perhaps it's not massively detrimental to democracy that they don't have a very clear platform, if that makes sense.
Now, bit of craziness this week. The May election, and I know we do a lot of election speculation, the May election will either be called in the next 2 weeks from now, or it won't happen. So at least we'll know. Now, I want to check back in with you, Theo, on where you are on Team May. There is an article in the HuffPost, basically people saying they're pretty confident after Prime Minister's questions on the 20th of March, Sunak will come out and call the election that afternoon. So we're talking like a couple of weeks from now. From my perspective, when the polling is how it is, and it's getting worse, it seems completely illogical, and I cannot see, unless Rishi Sunak is overtaken by like a public-facing desire of like, I'm going to do the right thing for the country and sort of get this over with. Beyond that, I don't think the May 2nd general election is happening. Where are you on this, Theo? In 2 weeks, one more podcast from now, are we going to be talking about the May election campaign? Is this real?
It would be nice. It would be very nice. I don't think it's in Sunak's interest to call an election soon. My theory is that he's essentially trying to, for whatever reason, stay in office as long as possible, either because he wants to get as much done, or because maybe he likes the power, or because he actually thinks he can turn his fortunes around. Whatever his thought process is, I think his plan is to delay it as long as possible.
It is
I said October before. I'm probably now in January 2025 camp.
Oh my God.
Which I hate to say, given that, that's going to mean a long time of us doing these podcasts that are supposed to be like the 6 months leading up to the election.
Oh no, you're in Team January 2025. That is bleak. That is bleak.
I mean, this government has already been known for bending its constitutional liberties. I'm sure we can see another one.
What's a few more? Yeah, it's technically they can do it. In terms of the election, I think it was the Times this weekend was basically saying people in government were saying we're waiting for something to turn up. It will probably be October or November, but also maybe July, but it won't be May. But again, that could be, they could be lying. Who knows? There's something in the Mail. Tory MPs proposed Super Thursday plan, holding a referendum on leaving the European Community of Human Rights, European Convention on Human Rights, on the same day as a general election. From my perspective, that's a bit of a batshit idea. I assume you agree, Theo, or do you think that's the route back for them?
Leaving the ECHR.
Yeah, holding a referendum on the same day as the election and somehow hoping that will mean they win.
I mean, in terms of trying to manipulate referendum results, I'm not sure, but leaving the ECHR, I think, well, it's a political question. I mean, it wouldn't really do anything post-Brexit, because obviously the only thing that binds us to human rights is the Human Rights Act, which is the thing you'd need to undo.
Yeah, which is
domestic. If they were going to have a
domestic
law, exactly. Yeah, statute law. So if you were to try and unbind the Human Rights Act with a referendum, well, I don't know how many people would vote for that, but again, that is big gray area. I mean, it's essentially revoking human rights. Some would put it that way.
Yeah.
But then again, from a migration standpoint, who knows?
I think there's an argument. There's an argument they There's an argument they can make. I just don't know if it's. I just don't see how that's a game changer, because I feel like swing voters, however they come down on it, will still vote Labour on like public services and the economy, right? They're not going to go, oh, they're holding this referendum, I'm going to vote Conservative.
Yeah, it's not like, well, they're holding this referendum to get over this law they had to circumvent to deal with immigration, and then they're going to make a significant change for the election. I'm not sure. And then for on the fence voters and the investment belt, Lib Dem, Tory.
You love the investment belt, don't you? That's your favourite area.
They're very important. I've always lived in investment belt constituencies, so it's like, I mean, I used to be Vince Cable's constituent.
Oh, that is peak
those
investment
voters.
belt.
Those voters, you say to them, oh yeah, by the way, we're just going to remove human rights. Are they going to like that? Not sure.
Probably not. I mean, put it this way. The ECHR is no Brexit as an issue. There's absolutely a way I can imagine a potent campaign whipping up public sentiment against it. But right now, it's broadly popular, and it splits the Conservative coalition in half. So Labour and Lib Dem voters are for it. Half of the Conservative voters are for it. So it sounds like you're going to shrink your base even more, rather than uniting it like Brexit did. So it could be reverse Brexit. You know how sort of Brexit split Labour, united the Tories. This would unite Labour and split the Tories. It seems counterintuitive from my point of view, but who knows? I do think we're probably in for, well, we keep saying this, one of the more brutal election campaigns we've had. And we keep hearing about all this money they're going to spend. They've taken off the caps on sort of expenditure. When is this starting? Because it doesn't, I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel that brutal so far. And the months are ticking by. Like, are we just coasting to a result? Is nothing going to happen?
Well, past performance is not indicative of future performance. But again, think about what we just said, that we talked months ago about how very little could potentially shift the fortunes of the parties right now. And that turned out to be true. What could realistically happen that would shift things? Obviously, things will start to heat up.
Yeah.
As an election looms closer. Of course, that's inevitable. That will always happen. But in terms of things outside the electoral cycle, it's unclear.
I mean, I heard something the other day go like, Russia needs to invade the UK for the Conservatives to win the next election. It's facile, but it's kind of true at the same time, isn't it? You need something on that scale.
Bring it, commies.
You need something. That's the Conservative strategy for victory is hope the country gets invaded. It's yeah. I mean, because Sunak came out. We were talking about this last week. Came out, did his whole like we're under deep threat from within, and no one cared. No one listened. It's just like the week just carries on. It feels the sort of I don't remember in my sort of in the popular consciousness a prime minister being like so impotent. Maybe that's because I don't remember the end of New Labour that well, and Gordon Brown as such a sort of diminished figure of ridicule. But even then, I just, do you remember a prime minister feeling this like no one listens? There's no sense of this is the leader. It's just everyone's just kind of like, all right, Rishi, and no one's.
I'd say the only thing comparable, and I'd say perhaps even very similar, is May and the dying days of her administration. But that was more to do with Brexit, and she was just another prime minister lost to the Brexit issue, rather than Sunak, who is, I guess you could say, a symptom of the Tories running out of time. But at the same time, a lot of it is to do with him and his administration. But I'd say, yeah, May perhaps comparable. I do, from what I do know, I mean, I was too young to remember, but the dying days of the Gordon Brown administration were similar.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Maybe, I guess this is what they always say. This is like the dying government feeling. But it just feels like it's kicking in more and more as the weeks go by. And it feels very, I mean, just the idea, you know, whatever the result is, because if the Conservatives won somehow, they'd have a refreshed mandate, and presumably Sunak would emerge with more authority than we ever remember him having. Whereas right now, and until the election, it feels like we have a ghost government, doesn't it? I just don't, there's no impetus, there's no agenda. Parliament's shutting shop at like 3 o'clock on a Tuesday sometimes. It's just like nothing's happening. And do you think that's like damaging long term to the body politic to just have like zombie government for a prolonged period of time?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's demoralizing for the electorate. It doesn't encourage political engagement. It causes disillusionment with the system. It's ineffective as well for, you know, dealing with policy.
Yeah.
Whether Labour will be able to renew, like, you know, political activity and sentiment when they get into office, I don't know. But definitely this zombified period of government. It was very similar again to the May and early Johnson period as well, when they couldn't get anything through Parliament and everyone was just complaining that the politics aren't working. The politics aren't working. It was like a pressure building up in a dam, and it just needed to release. And that time it did with the 2019 election. The similar thing may happen with Labour, but at the moment, a situation like this, it's it's not encouraging, I don't think.
Yeah, this is the thing. We've got a government with a clear majority. Feels like it has no power. We're going to obviously elect a Labour government. And I was just thinking about this the other day. They're clearly going to have a majority. It may be a record majority. I mean, I wouldn't rule out it being the biggest majority Labour have ever won. Maybe that's 50% chance or something. It's not as confident a prediction as they win. But you then have a government minimally scrutinised as opposition. They are going to have, for 5 years, complete control of all the levers of state. And I think, don't know about you, I feel like there's the potential for like a massive groundswell. Labour become the most popular government in years simply by like doing a few things people like and being broadly okay. Whereas equally, I think there is the potential for like an instant backlash. Like 1 year in, Keir Starmer is like the least popular prime minister on record or something. I mean, do you have any inkling which way that's going to go, or do you think it is very much dependent on what they actually do once they get in?
I would say it depends very little on what they actually do.
Do you think circumstances in the country then?
Political sentiment. Sorry?
Circumstances in the country then, or?
Circumstances in the country, yes. I mean, we've had changes of government, right? Since 2010, but no changes of the party in government, which is far bigger. And it's worth noting, sounds dramatic, that since 2010, things have changed. Social media has become a huge part of politics. The 24-hour news cycle has become far more ingrained. People are far more in touch with the daily flows of the political system. We don't know if a new administration will really have that honeymoon period anymore, that time to get settled in or whatever. Like whether they get just smashed to pieces straight away by public opinion is unclear, because it's kind of unprecedented. A new administration in this country, completely new, entering in the kind of post-information era, what that's going to look like. And that is all circumstance. That's nothing to do with Labour policy. It sounds bold, but I would wager that will be what determines it.
That's such a good point. I'd never thought about that. Someone needs to write, maybe I'll do it. Someone needs to write a think piece about that. Because this is the first.
Think about it. Last time a Labour administration was elected newly following a Tory administration, the majority of people were getting their news from papers in the city, newsstands, the news agent. It was a very different time.
And we're going to have, right? My other thought is, all the sort of people, I don't say this to demean them, this is just a political type. The people that large numbers of our generation, who sort of came of age during Conservative era, really despise the Conservatives. I mean, they're on single digits with young people. And Labour won like a super majority of them in 2019, when they lost every other demographic. These voters that are overwhelmingly going to vote Labour, with no love for Keir Starmer, that they're going to vote Labour because it's Labour and it's not the Tories. What are these people that sort of post like anti-Tory infographics and are sort of generically socially liberal? This demographic, this whole generational demographic, how are they going to react to like a Labour government doing things they don't like? Like once the Tories are no longer in power, what does that do psychologically? Do you see what I'm getting at? I feel like that's like going to be a big...
There needs to be an outlet for that constant need to disagree with whatever's going on.
There's like because what are they going to do? Like they're going to start posting like conservative anti-Labour infographics. Like what's going to happen? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that is a very good point, because
it feels like a massive.
Regardless of how the Labour administration do, things are going to take time, and they're going to. Things are going to go wrong, and it's not all going to go perfectly. It might go horribly wrong.
Keir Starmer is not governing for students, right? And he's going to do loads of stuff that's going to upset the same people that have been upset by the Conservatives consistently, i.e.
Well, yeah, I think
generation,
the momentum sect has been just as big a vocal opponent of Starmer as the right has, I'd say. So I'm sure they're not going to give them an easy time. I mean, when you've got a Labour administration in power, that is an opening somewhere down the line for a different brand of Labour to come in. If the Starmer brand falls, it's not immediately that the Tories will get in. It could be a leadership challenge, and it could be that the left find their way back in. I mean, Corbyn's burial, so to speak, was almost 5 years ago now. I would not rule out plenty of activism behind the scenes trying to slowly push Labour back to the left and maybe get a momentum type leader elected somewhere down the line. So in terms of people just being content with Starmer's leadership, I don't think so, especially because of the magnitude of, changing governments like that and the amount of problems that they'll run into, and deficits and debt and false and promises that will be defaulted on and things like that.
This is the thing. I think for most voters, expectations of Labour are in the toilet. It's like, we don't like you either, but we want a change of government. So if Labour do a few things well, a lot of voters will go, great. Young voters who have been consistently disillusioned by the Conservatives since they've come into power, were disillusioned by them before they came into power, came of age sort of with their failures being very, they got none of the benefits of Tory policy. They didn't benefit from rising asset prices. They sort of felt the brunt of stuff like tuition fees, all this kind of stuff. And these voters are probably the voters that are going to have, like, I'm not going to say unrealistically, but very high expectations, and probably be the slowest to forgive failings of a Labour government. And I think that'll be a very interesting dynamic to watch. Theo, thank you for joining me. Next week, maybe it will be the eve of the May election being called. Who knows? But I'll see you then for another... I guess, should we take bets next week on how we feel? If the murmurings are louder, we'll make a bet on like the probability of the May election being called.
I'll make you a market, sure.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm at about 5%, but we'll see how we feel at the end of next week.
We shall see. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. See you soon, Theo.